Welcome back, Bookish Besties, to the Booked Solid podcast. We have the joy of hosting a truly prolific and wildly inspiring guest today. It is my privilege to introduce RaeAnne Thayne. RaeAnne is a New York Times, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, and #1 Publishers Weekly bestselling author with more than 10 million copies in print. She just released her 75th book. We are so excited to celebrate this milestone with her by talking about this new release, the December market, holiday books as a genre, her amazing career, and everything in between. Welcome, RaeAnne.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Of course. I am holding the December market.
Yes,
if
it's
you are
beautiful.
watching the YouTube or Instagram, it is stunning. This foil lettering for the title, it's
shiny, sparkly.
So beautiful.
I love it. I've had so many people message me about it on Instagram when I posted like stories and it shimmered. They were like, what is that book? Where did you get that? I'm like, it's gorgeous. And
It really
is so much fun. So
it really is. It's beautiful.
So it released on October 8th, which was this past week. How are you feeling with release week and everything? I know it's exciting.
It's always exciting, even though, like you mentioned, this is my 75th book. It's always a thrill every single time I have a book out. There's finally, I worked on it, 8 months ago or whatever when I turned it in. And so it's always sort of a hesitation and a little anticipation time till I wait till it gets out and readers finally get the chance to read it. And so
I love it. Well, can you tell our listeners, also say our readers, your readers, our listeners about it, just kind of the gist of the book? We've been sharing a little bit about it on social media, but for those of you that maybe don't follow us or haven't seen our post about it, if you could just give us a little overview of what the December market is all about.
Sure. So this is a cozy Christmas story. If you're in the mood for something that brings you all the holiday feels, I promise this will do that. So it features, this is the second book in my Shelter Spring series that started last year with Christmas at the Shelter Inn, but you don't have to read that one. If you haven't read that one, that's totally fine. This one you'll be fine with. This is the sister of the hero of that one, is the heroine of this one. And she suffered some loss about 10 years ago and also sort of had a dysfunctional childhood. And so that sort of made her withdraw from life and love, and she dedicates her time to her community. So she organizes the town's Christmas market and runs it every year and keeps it running. It's a benefit market that they give a portion of the proceeds to a cause in the community. And so she is not interested in anything else until her grandmother starts dating somebody else. And her grandmother she's not thrilled about it. She's concerned because her grandma struggled with when her grandfather died. So she doesn't want her grandma to be hurt. Her grandma's kind of vulnerable. So she enlists the grandson of this new beau to her grandmother to try and help her kind of keep them apart. He doesn't agree, so there's a little bit of conflict there. He thinks it's great for both of them. If they're old enough, they might as well be happy with each other if that's what they want. So anyway, he has a cute little boy, and there's Christmas markets and fun, hot chocolate, all the good things that I love about the holiday season.
I love it. Stephanie and I are both diving into it, and we are loving it. Stephanie has been listening to the audio, I believe. I started reading it in the physical copy, but when she mentioned the audio, I switched to the audio, and it is fabulous. It is so good.
I started it paperback a while ago, and then I'm such an audiobook person and love to walk while I listen, and so I was like, let's see if there's an audiobook right when it came out. So it is just a fantastic narration and such a magical story. I love it. You write the sweet romance so well, the small town vibe. I am curious, is Shelter Springs a fictional town or a real town?
It's a fictional town. So I did a series that had about 8 books in it called Haven Point, and I always referred to the neighboring town of Shelter Springs.
I love that.
Really happened there. It was just sometimes they needed to go out of town, and so I had and I was looking for somewhere to create a new Christmas series, and I thought, well, wait a second, I've got this town that I've never really described or anything. I might as well, put it there. And so it's loosely based on McCall, Idaho, which is, a ways away from Boise, and it has a beautiful lake there, and that's basically the central point geographic feature of this community is it's on Lake Haven, this huge lake. And so it's basically a town that has, like many Western towns, is sort of rebuilding, reshaping itself. Tourism sort of came in about 40 years ago to the West, and a lot of towns have been taken over by tourism. And so it's difficult for communities to still feel that sense of community when they have many more visitors than locals. And sort of the vibe that I was trying to go for with this book and the community that I created there.
I love it. I really love the pancake scene where they're cooking pancakes and it's time for the heat to turn up in more ways than one. It was just, you write the romance so well. It's sweet and it's sexy, but it's cozy. I just all about it. I love Rafe as a character and the grandparent sort of dynamic setup story. I don't know that I've ever read a book with that plot, and it's just a lot of fun. It makes for a lot of family dynamics and this sweet little boy Isaac. It's just everything about it is delightful.
Well, good. Well, I love to write multi-generational stories, and I've done similar ones, never with this quite this age group where they're in their 80s or close to that. But I've seen it in my own life and in friends of mine where people don't like to be alone, and they're to each other for lots of different reasons. And sometimes that can be tough for children and grandchildren to see their parent or grandparent finding joy again. But they have a limited time left in life. Why not be as happy as possible in that limited time in life?
I love that.
Yeah. You do such a good job also of giving your characters just really interesting stories. They're really complex and lovable and emotional. And I also saw that you are a journalist in your background. Like you used to work as a journalist. And I was thinking, I'm like, I bet that her journalism background just gave her that human interest ability. Like it just feels really natural and you give them these amazing stories.
That was my favorite part about being a reporter was interviewing people, because I discovered that everybody has a story. You just have to ask enough questions, and then you'll get the right answers. And so characters are my favorite part. Coming up with characters that's my favorite part about writing. I'm in the process of starting a new book right now, and I just love that, getting to know these people and kind of feel like they're real people in my head anyway. I hope the readers once they read them. But and I really also feel pretty strongly about good backstories for my characters, because obviously we all have backstories. There's been through things, and sometimes that impacts us in ways that make us sort of reluctant to realize that we deserve a happy ending. And I think that's very much the case with Amanda. She does not know that. She doesn't feel like she deserves a happy ending because of, she lost her fiance about 10 years ago, and then she tried to get engaged again a few years ago, and that didn't work out. And her father sort of caused a lot of harm in this community, and she kind of carries the burden of that, even though it's right for her to carry that burden. And so she doesn't really, she just feels like, okay, this is my life now. I'll just dedicate myself to the community. And then she falls in love with this first Rafe's little boy, Isaac. She falls in love with him first because
so sweet.
And then, of course, she falls in love with Rafe as well, and then realizes, that her life can be richer and fuller, not necessarily because she has a man in it, but because she's opened her heart to love.
It's beautiful. You listeners are in for a treat. It's just what you need. Whether you cozy up with the paperback or pop it in while you're running your holiday errands, it's just the perfect read. And we would love to talk with you a little bit about Christmas and holiday books as a genre. We have a lot of listeners who are aspiring authors or working successful authors, people at every level. And first, I would love to know, is this only your second Christmas book, or have you written more Christmas books than that over the years of your 75?
22nd.
Oh, okay. So we are talking to the right person.
Yes.
I know. And I think, Christmas books, it's one of those things. I would love to write Christmas books one day. And every time, October, even as early as September hits, I'm like waiting to see what's going to. What do you have to share about them as a genre? And more specifically, the market and how they are released, how they sell. Is it similar to your other books? Because there's still this smaller window for reading, but then I'm sure they sell year over year. We would just love to hear your thoughts on them as someone who's like, I want to write a holiday book. What should I expect?
So first of all, feel like holiday books are a really good fit for my voice, because my books are about family, about community, about caring for each other, and of course that fits very well in the holiday season. And so and my books have been described as comfort reads, which I'm great. And what other season do we need comfort than holidays? We're all so busy and stressful, and it's great to just sort of sink into a story. I love writing them. It's been a journey. I think I did my first Christmas book probably in about 2008, maybe. So I've been doing one a year, or at least 1 year I did two that year, because I had two different kinds of books out at the same time. And I love that time of year myself. And so I love writing about it. It's hard to write a Christmas book in March sometimes when you're not really thinking about Christmas and you want to be planting your garden. But I'm lucky enough now that my writing season, I'm starting a Christmas book right now. So I'm gearing up for it. I'm planning it as I'm myself anticipating the holidays. That's really fun. I'll probably finish it in February or March. But I found that I put a Christmas tree up as soon as I start writing the Christmas book in my office. And then it helps me get in the holiday mood. I start listening to Christmas music as soon as I start writing my Christmas book. And I keep it up. I keep the tree up until my book is done. So it usually doesn't come down until February or so.
I love that.
And that's okay, because it's in my office and it's away from my house, and I can just turn on the twinkly lights and feel.
I love that. I love that you fully set the mood. So in your timeline as an author right now, if you're writing that now, will it come out next Christmas, like a year later?
Christmas, yes. It's due, I think my deadline is February 1st or something like that, and it will come out in probably October. And you asked about the production schedule, or at least the output time. It's hard to know when a book should come out at Christmas time. Too early, nobody's interested in it. It doesn't get the momentum that you're hoping for. If you put it out too late, you've got such a short window. That is the problem with Christmas books, is January, nobody wants to read a Christmas book in January. So there you've got this. It's great because there's a lot of velocity and there's a lot of momentum on the front end of it. And those books do sell year after year when people are looking for books. And especially, I write with the publisher, New York publisher. And so my books are sometimes a little bit higher priced, but they go down in price in subsequent years. And my publisher does Kindle deals and things like that. And people can find them that way. And so it is good, especially they're somewhat timeless in terms of, you could pick up my book from 20 years ago that was a Christmas book and it won't feel out of, out of. Obviously, there are some things that maybe don't quite, but for the most part, Christmas, those traditions are timeless for many.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Canary Press is the imprint, correct?
Yes, and that's
Canary Street Press.
Harlequin,
Awesome.
yes.
Well, speaking of 20 years ago, it's actually been longer than 20 years. Your first book came out in 1995. I feel like when we say 20 years ago, I'm only 28, but when I say 20 years ago in my head, I still think the 80s. I'm feeling like 20 years ago should be the 80s, not the 2000s. But your first book came out in 1995, and 75 books since then. That is amazing. Let me just say that. Stephanie and I were talking about this yesterday. She texted me and she was like, did you know she's written 75 books? Amazing. That is phenomenal. But we would love to know, since we're both just now entering the industry, what are some of the biggest changes you have seen in the publishing world over the course of the last 30 years?
Oh, so many changes. Let me tell you. I tell people, when I first started writing, we didn't have email. So I had to write a letter to a publishing house and say, I've written this proposal. Are you interested? Then I'd wait and I'd get a letter back.
Yes.
Proposal. So I'd print it out and send it off to them.
We think we have to be patient now. I mean,
it's really situation. Yeah. And then they'd communicate with phone calls or letters. That's how I contact my editor. And, it seems so bizarre because email and the internet has been such a part of our life for so long. But when I would finish a book, so after I sold books, I would finish one when I was published. And even for quite a long time, even after the internet was available and email was available, my publisher still needed a printed copy. So the day that I would finish it, I would have to print it out and FedEx it to New York because I was usually my deadline, and it cost an arm and a leg to FedEx it. And I'd have to, go to the copy center, make 3 copies so that I had one and my agent had one and my editor had one. A little bit different. And, So that's a big change. And I would say when ebooks obviously was a huge change for the industry and when that came out. And I know a lot of people were concerned that people wouldn't be interested in books anymore. I've loved seeing that that is absolutely not the case. Everybody still loves paper books. That's just still something that resonates with people. And I love that, especially younger generation love paper books. You would think that they would be more digital than the rest of us, but I mean, I read on my Kindle. I don't like reading an actual book now because I'm old and I need to pull up the type and be able to see the words. And when I'm typing, I've been on a computer all day long, I need to be able to blow that up big so I don't have to work at it. And the other thing I'd say, two other changes that have been significant that I've seen. First of all, audiobooks coming in. Nobody listened to audiobooks back in the day when I first started. In the last probably 5 years, and really the last few since COVID, I would say, everybody sort of has discovered the joy of audiobooks. I think that started with podcasts and people realizing they could listen on their phones, and it was convenient and easy to, sync to your car as you're driving or whatever. I've loved seeing audiobooks. I have become much more of an audiobook reader. I still call them a reader. I don't know what you call them, audiobook. It was, and that's really how I enjoy most of the books anymore. And I love the different performances. It just brings the story alive to me. Reminds me of being a kid and listening to a teacher read to me or my mom read to me. Whatever. So that's one of the big changes. And obviously the other one is TikTok. That has significantly changed the publishing industry for the better in lots of ways. In other ways, it's a little bit of a struggle for maybe some of us who aren't quite sure our books resonate with the TikTok crowd because my books aren't really sexy, which seems to be what TikTok loves the most. And so it's a little difficult to keep finding your place in an ever-changing landscape where you're not quite sure how to keep your books out there and keep them relevant and keep your readers interested. So there's always changes.
Lots of changes.
But the most important thing I would say that I've learned through 30 years, it's all about the story for authors. You write the story that means something to you. You work on your craft. That's all you can do. That's the only thing you can control is making your writing the best product as you possibly can and making it fresh every single time. And that's hard to do with 75 books to write something new. And at 22 Christmas books, how many, Christmas themes can I have? And, looking at Christmas lights, but you just have to try to make it fresh every single time. That's the challenge.
I think that probably does have to be challenging. I know there's a few authors that have an extensive library, and a lot of the times you can kind of see that same thread throughout all of them. And the story's being retold in just a little bit different way. So I can imagine I know that's something that Stephanie and I talk about a lot, and I talk with other authors about is finding that story that hasn't already been told. And it's almost impossible now with as many authors and indie and things like that's out there. So I definitely agree.
Never find a story that hasn't been told. I mean, never find one. There's only so many stories that can be told.
Exactly.
But it's your individual voice that brings the heart and the soul to your writing. And so that's the point, even if you're writing, even if I gave 4 people the very same story and it would come out differently every single time because of the individual life experiences of the author and the writing style and the things that they tend to focus on. One thing I will bring up, since you're both writers, I actually plot with other writers. And I know a lot of people think that's a strange thing to do, but I don't do every single book. In fact, this Christmas book, I didn't plot with anyone else, but we get together once a year in San Diego at a beach house, and we're all many, many multi-published. We all have lots of books under in our oeuvre, whatever you call it. And so we want to bring something fresh and new. And so it really helps we give the idea, we have the idea, we come up with the characters, we come up with the conflicts, we come up with plot ideas, we send them out to this group of four writers that I trust. And then we all brainstorm possible plots for these characters, possible turning points, all those things. And it helps to make the writing feel more fresh because each one of us has sort of a different style. I have one friend who writes great romantic comedy and kind of more sexier books. So she helps me sort of figure out, I need to add a little bit of elements of this. And then another one is super great at the emotional part of it. And so she helped me say, well, how you could heighten the emotion by doing this. And so it does make the books feel more fresh to me as I'm writing them. And I hope it makes them feel better to the author or to the reader, excuse me.
That's such a good idea.
That.
Stephanie, we need to do a yearly writing retreat.
Totally. We do a lot of that just through text and voice notes and stuff, but I think that would be really valuable to just sit in a room, hammer it out. I love a good brainstorm session. That's
well, the good part of it is we're there for three days usually, and it's we work very, very hard. I try to explain this to my husband. We work very hard. We're so exhausted, but there's lots of time to chat, and we need that as authors because we're so alone all the time. And it's hard to sit alone and be by yourself with your characters who do feel real and are, do become friends. But there's something to talking to people who get it, who know what it's like to come up with these characters and be in our heads all the time, Other people who get it, it can be really valuable. So it's so energizing every time we have our plot group in February. Usually we come from cold places and we're excited to get out and we're warm and sit on the beach and talk and chat and plot.
That's so fun. Well, I love that in your actual dedication for the December market, you thanked your family for enduring your deadline brain time and time again. I was on a big deadline this week, and I really felt that because it's just a whole thing. And you have a lot of experience, years ahead of us, in balancing motherhood, family life, 75 books. And I would love to know a little bit about what deadline brain feels and looks like for you. You have for us with little kids in the decades ahead of how you balance that.
It's not a pretty sight, as I'm sure you guys know from your deadlines. It's hard to explain, but the last about 3 weeks, even depending on how far behind I am on a book, it's the only thing I can think about. I don't want to plan anything else. I don't want to think about anything else. I can't go on a vacation. I can't, that last few weeks at least is totally focused on the book. And I'm lucky enough that I have an office out of my home. I have an office next door. This is in my home, but my office next door. And it's a great place that I can go to. And so I get up in the morning, I head over there, I work as hard as I can. We have a son with special needs. And so as soon as he gets home from his day program, I'm here with him. But while he's gone, that's sort of what I'm doing. And even when I'm caregiving, I'm thinking about what needs to come next. How do I revise this? And it is a lot of stress. And it's something that I think every time I think I can't pull this off, I can't do it. And then somehow miraculously together in the last probably 3 or 4 days, And I don't know about you guys, but I write a very, very rough draft. That's my first draft. It's really rough. I call it kind of the discovery draft, where I'm just figuring out the scenes, figuring out the characters. I write a lot of the dialogue, but I end up changing that. And then I do the second draft, and I should call it a great name because I'm all about, positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
I call it the slog because it just feels like a slog, that second draft, just trying to get everything right. And I have to work out all the details of the things I've left blank. I have to figure all that out. So that's the hard part. And then the final draft, the polished draft, I love that part where I'm just going in and trying to make the prose sparkle a little bit more than I did, in the second draft. And that's usually what I'm doing. Like the last week of the book is just making sure that everything works timeline wise, which is a big problem with me, that I haven't changed the character's eye color halfway through.
Yeah, totally.
Continuity.
It happens.
Sure does.
And then, for me, it seems to be the timeline. I get things messed up. And I keep a calendar. So all of my books I write an actual calendar where I say this happened on this day, so that I know it was 4 days ago or whatever, but there's still
That's
things.
really smart. I might need to get my calendar.
I know.
What I do is I take it, I go into, I have an iPad, so I go into the calendar app on my iPad, and I don't select any of the calendars. So it's just a blank calendar, and I take a screenshot of that. And then I just have that in I use Good Notes for my apps, and I just put it in there, and I just handwrite. This is happening. This scene is the first.
That's really smart.
It's so smart because I do that in my messy journal, just writing dates. But why not just use a calendar?
Exactly.
It's crazy how your brain can just get jumbled. It's so easy to mess up the timeline, whether that's even days of the week or years. It's just, oh my goodness.
I will say that is another thing that has changed since 30 years ago. There's so many more tools for organization than there were when I started out. I mean, I started out on a computer that didn't even have it had 2 floppy drives. So it booted up on a floppy and then you stuck another floppy in there. And then with my very first royalty, I bought one of the very early Macs and thought I was all that. I spent the whole royalty for whole advance on and now I write on a MacBook Air, but I keep my iPad next to me that has the notes. That's where I keep basically I call it the Bible to my book, which tells me characters' names, their hair color, which amazingly I can forget halfway through. I can forget what people like her name is. I'm happy to go back through. I had written it down, so I don't have to go all back through the whole book. So it's really helpful. I have a few apps that I've come up with that I use. One is unfortunately not available anymore. It's the best one that I found, and I've tried to find a substitute for it, but it's called just Index Card, and it basically lets me write a scene. It's just an index card app, and I can move the index cards around on the page. So I do one scene per index card when I'm plotting, and so I will do, in each POV. So I'll have the heroines will be one color, the hero will be another color. If I do a secondary heroine, which I sometimes do, if there's a subplot that's substantial in the book, I'll put her in a different color, and I can move those around and make sure that I'm looking visually at how is this working. Am I doing too many point of view in the heroine, too many scenes point of view, not enough scenes in his, so it helps me, excuse me, helps me kind of organize the story that way. And you can actually do that same, excuse me, that same method with just regular index cards, where you just on the floor and organize your book that way. But I like doing it on my iPad.
That's really neat. I haven't thought about that. I do like I call it my murder mystery board, where I've got all the different, and I just started doing that because the first book that I wrote that I got my agent with, I did not take a single note. I didn't write anything down. Like, there is no evidence of that book other than the Google Doc. And after that, when I started working on the one that I just turned in, I was like, I really might need to take some notes. I really might need to write down their eye color. So after I finished, though, I went back and made my little murder mystery board for it and pulled all the things together on my big poster board. But I tried to do the iPad notes, but I don't know, just something about just actually seeing it like on a big made a big difference. So, but everybody does it differently, and it's so fun watching different authors on Instagram and seeing how everybody's got their own little system that works.
I love that, and I especially love that I've been at this for a long time, but I find new things and new ways to do things. That's part of what makes it exciting and interesting, and brings freshness to me as an author, because you've done this. I've written many, many, many words. If I think 75 books and they're about 80,000 words each, and how many times did I revise them? That's a lot of words that I put down on the page over my lifetime. And so it's fun if you try something different. Try dictation for a while. Try whatever, and sometimes you hit on something that really works well for you. And so that's the fun of it, I think. The adventure.
I agree. Totally. And switching it up to keep from getting stale.
Right.
Those little changes can go a long way. I'm all about the iPhone notes, probably similar to iPad. I just use the iPhone notes app, but my notes app is literally everything. Everything is in here. I die if it crashed or disappeared. I have book ideas. I have character profiles. It's
great. It's great because I can access those same notes on my computer. I can access them on the iPad. I can access them on my phone. So I just have a folder for each book. And then put everything in there. I had all about the heroine, all about the hero. Everything's in there.
Apple makes it easy. It's all just together. I read on a MacBook Air too. But my laptop, I love it. So light, comes anywhere with me. It's fantastic. I love that.
Well, we would love to know what your biggest piece of advice is for authors that are just starting out or maybe just in the thick of it, being somebody who has such an amazing library of work. What is if you could culminate it all into one piece of advice, what would you tell an author?
One piece of advice is
That is
I
hard.
want to talk as you can.
You can give us more than one. You can give us several.
Mostly the
creative.
most important advice I ever received when I started out was don't give up, because at that point there are discouragements that come whatever phase you are. There are discouragements at this point of my career. There are things that you just feel like, oh, is this worth it? All this work, is it worth it? But really it's basic, it's cliche, but don't give up, because I really feel like anybody who wants this, who pursues it with a passion, will succeed at it, because you will not, your books at some point will find a readership, whether that's because you work on your craft enough that you've made it more appealing to different people, or you hit on a story that everybody loves. You will find success at some point in your career if you keep up at it. If you give up, who knows? You'll probably never achieve what you want to do, and you'll never know what you could achieve if you give up at some point. And also the other thing I'd say, dream bigger than you think, because when I started out, I wanted to just have a career that I could stay at home with my kids, that I could write, that I could put some money on the table. Quit my journalism job. We cut our income in half. It was really tough for about 5 or 6 years, probably a little more than that, trying to figure out how we were going to make this work where I wasn't really bringing in a ton of money. And then, I just kept at it. A few things happened in my career that changed things. I never would have dreamed of hitting the New York Times. That was never even on my radar. I just wanted to write category romances for Harlequin, my dream. And then, I got pushed by friends to write a single title. And so I did, and it found success, and the next one found success. And after about 4 single titles, the first one hit the New York Times, and they continued to do that. And they still are hitting the New York Times. I've had about 17 books, and it boggles my mind every time that I have that much of a readership, but it really is. I didn't dream big enough when I started out. So I tell people,
I love that. So have you been with Harlequin this entire time? You started trade and then have
Actually, my first 5 books were for Bantam Love Swept, which is a line that they had way back in the day, and they discontinued it. I think my last one came out in 97, I think. 98. And then I wanted to write for 2 different publishers, so I had already submitted to my editor at Silhouette at the time, which Harlequin bought, and she ended up buying my first book for them. So that was in 90. I think my first book for them came out in 99. So I've been there ever since. I've actually had the same editor for all of those books.
Wow.
That's really special.
She's been great. Well, I love her.
And how many books a year? What is your kind of timeline on how many releases you have a year?
So right now I'm doing 2. There have been other times in my career when I've been writing somewhat shorter books that I could handle 3. The books I'm writing right now are more women's fiction, romance. So they are, especially my summer books in particular, are more beach read, a little bit, I wouldn't say deeper, but there's a more complex subplot and things like that. And so those take longer. So right now my schedule is 2 books a year. And I think that's probably where I will end up, because it's harder for me just with my life, my family situation, to write more than that.
Yeah. That's impressive. 2 a year. Definitely. It's so great. So what about your agent? Have you had multiple agents over the years? Do you still have an agent? What does that look like for you?
I absolutely do have an agent. I didn't have an agent for my first 4 books. And then I got an agent because I wanted to write for 2 different publishers, and I knew I would need somebody to help me navigate that. And then I had her for about 8 years, and she left the business. And so by then I'd sold quite a few books for Harlequin. I had a great relationship with my editor, and I thought, well, I'm fine now. I don't need an editor or an agent, excuse me. And so I was on my own for about 6-7 years. And then when I wanted to write single title, I knew I would need to have an agent at that point in my career. And so I had a great agent who really helped me kind of get a foot in the door. And then she sort of started semi-retirement, and I kind of felt like I needed somebody who was a little more involved with certain things. And so I changed agents about 4 years ago. And it's all been great. All of them have been wonderful. I've loved them all. And having a great agent can really be helpful. A great agent can be worse than having no agent. So
100%.
Yes.
do your due diligence and find one who works for you. To be helpful. But you don't need one. It depends on where you are in your career. I'm traditionally published, and so in that world, you absolutely do need an agent because they're negotiating the contracts with your publisher, and they're, eliminating clauses that they don't like. And they're helping, if there's movie sub rights and things like that, they're helping with that. So it really kind of depends where you are in your career. If you don't have an agent, I wouldn't feel like, you can't still achieve success, because you don't need one if you're self-published, certainly, because you can do all of those things on your own that my agent is doing for me.
Yeah. Have you ever self-published, or no? Are they all traditional?
They're all traditional, except I got the rights back for my first Love Sweps. And so I've put those up by myself. So I wouldn't say I'm hybrid, because I'm not putting anything new out, but I
Got it.
put some of my backlist. And then I wrote a lot of short stories at one point for Women's World magazine, short romantic stories. And so I put up a few little collections here and there. So I've dabbled in it, but I'm not experienced by any means.
It's a whole different world.
I have friends who are doing fabulously well, and I think it's great. And who knows where the traditional publishing world is going to end up.
Yeah.
I never say never. That might be, somewhere where I end up taking my career at some point in my life. I hope not. But I mean, not that I don't want to do it. It's just it seems like so much work.
It is. Yeah.
You're self-published, and I don't have to think about designing a cover or, all of those and writing the ads. I mean, I still do ads for my books and things like that, but I don't have to focus on all that. I can mostly write, send my book to my publisher, deal with the social media side of it, all that. But
Stephanie has two indie published books, and she's going traditional now. And then I have just gone straight traditional. And I was talking to some friends that are indie yesterday, and I was crying about my own traditional problems, and then they were telling me what all they were doing, and I was like, I feel so bad, because I've got people handling these things for me, and here y'all are having to do it all yourselves. And it's just so much. I told them, I was like, I don't know how y'all wear all these hats, because I'm over here struggling just making my Instagram post for this week, and y'all.
Yeah, I'm so impressed by the
I am too. Yes.
And the effort and the creativity, and they come up with so many fabulous ways to get their books out there. I feel fortunate in some ways that I don't know that my brain works super well that way, but I mean, if it had to, I'll adapt. If that's the way things end up happening, I will adapt and make it. At this point, I'm really happy that I have a great relationship with my publisher, and we seem to work well together. So
absolutely, I know.
One thing I love about that is they can get me into foreign markets that I don't do on my own. And that's fabulous.
And bookstores and just the reach and distribution, all of that. Yeah, I wouldn't trade it. I'm so glad I did it. I loved it. I really always say I learned to literally take a book from A to Z, like at my kitchen table, and have it look beautiful. And I'm very pleased with how it all went. But when I wrote my third book, I just felt really ready for an agent. And I signed with her in June for my third book. And I'd be lying if I did like the relief of my to-do list and what that looked like for indie publishing. It's just so much admin and strategy. It's just like really endless. So to be able to balance that sort of business strategy to-do list with the creativity it really takes to dive into novel fiction writing, it was hard. So not to say I won't ever do it again, but it's really nice to have someone championing me, and she's very editorial, which is a relief. It's just been great. So
that's great. Yeah. And you do have to have both sides of your brain clicking at the time. And I'm not sure I do after all these years of mostly focusing on the writing. And the other side just doesn't want to engage when it comes to that strategy and all that.
Right. And we do I love the marketing, and I love, there's enough of that, I feel like, but it's definitely a different approach that is very popular. Again, so many are doing it so well, and that's a big change, obviously, in the industry, but it's amazing that you've had this long traditional career. Well, I did see on your website that something to the effect of when you're not writing, you're reading as much as you can. What are some of the books that you like to read? Do you like to read the same genre that you write? Do you read widely? Do you have any recent reads that you've loved? What does your reading life look like?
So I do not usually read a lot in my own genre, just because I love historical romance. That was sort of my entry into into the romance world was when I was a teenager and discovered these fabulous authors like Madeline Brent and authors like that. Which you guys are probably too young. You probably don't know who that is, but she was fabulous. Anyway, and so that was sort of my entry into discovering a love for reading. And so that is still my escape because it feels so different from what I write myself. I find if I read a lot of contemporary romance or women's fiction that I'm, thinking about how they did it compared to how I would do it and things like that. And I don't like that. I like being able to escape. So historical fiction, I really enjoy. I love, like mysteries. I read quite a few of thrillers, things like that. As far as what I've read recently, let me think of, I'm trying to think of what was most recent. And again, it's audio. Right now I'm reading J.D. Robb. I've been reading through all of her books. Again, there's like 60 of them, I think. And I'm rereading them all. And I've enjoyed that experience, the in-depth books. I just finished Eloisa James. I love her books and just finished one of hers. I like to listen to more World War II kind of historical kind of books. I loved Dear Mrs. Bird. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one. It's A.J. Pierce, and that was a great one. It was a great one. And then like Kate Quinn, right? It's fabulous.
Oh, she's fantastic.
Yeah. Listen to hers. Hers are so good because they're so well narrated. I mean,
they really
well
are
written to begin with. You can't have a great narration if the book is not well written. But then she always has fabulous narrators.
She wrote the Alice Network, right? The Alice Network. That book blew me away.
The Rose Code.
That one was so good. I still think about that book. Yeah, I'm a big historical fiction. That's like my comfort read is a good historical fiction. So I loved Kate Quinn. I love all of her books. Oh, so good.
Very, very good.
Yes. I think I've read Rose Code twice just because I read it the first time. I think my mind was so blown that I was like, okay, I need to like process it and read it again where I can actually enjoy it and just soak it up, because the first time I read it, I was just like, and turning the pages so fast that I think some of it kind of got lost because I was just like, this is amazing. This is so good.
Yeah. That's actually advice I give in a lot of times when I'm doing writing workshops, is to read a book twice. Read it first. I say read it first for enjoyment, just for the sheer writing or the reading enjoyment. And then the second time, read it to analyze what they did right, what they did, how they handled the pacing, how they built the characters, how they, how the dialogue worked for you and what worked and what didn't work. And I feel like I did that early in my career, or even before I sold, I think I did that quite a bit, because I think that really taught me by these books that I loved what people were doing right. And it sort of helped me figure out, okay, this is the rhythm that I need to set for tone or for pacing, which is so hard to figure out, when you're first trying to learn how to write. That's one of the biggest struggles, I'd say, is pacing. And so reading other books and kind of figuring out, okay, this was the turning point that they put here. This was, how they kept me hanging on the edge at the end of the chapter, all of them. Sort of, I tried to incorporate those and absorb those when I was trying to learn to write.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, to close out, we have just a fun question, since you have written so many Christmas books and this book is just a blast. Do you have any favorite Christmas movies?
Ooh, favorite Christmas movies. Yes, I have a lot of favorite Christmas movies.
Let's hear them.
I love to watch Elf. That's one of my favorites.
Yes.
Every year.
We watch it every year, and it makes me just as happy every year.
Okay.
The other one that's I always mention this and people are like, what are you talking about? Arthur Christmas is one of my favorites. And I don't know if you guys remember that. It was animated. It's an animated one. And it had James McAvoy was the main character. And I laugh every single time. And it's just so sweet. I like that story a lot. I'm trying to think what else. I usually watch It's a Wonderful Life at least once through the season. Good. I love that one. That's it. Those are about the main ones. I seem like I find a new one every year, but I tend to really like watching episodes of I watch a lot of British TV. So I usually have Christmas episodes. So I'll rewatch those Christmas episodes and I enjoy it.
Now, do you watch the Hallmark Christmas movies?
Sometimes. I haven't, I don't watch a lot of them, again, because I write books that are 100%. Similar to that. And I don't feel like I'm derivative, like I'm taking from Hallmark movies. So I have watched them and I do love the ones that I've watched, but I don't watch a lot. I love that people are so committed that they'll put the calendar on their wall. or what movie comes out what day, but
Totally.
I'm afraid.
I know. I try to watch like the best ones. I try to like narrow it down and watch like 5 or 6 a year. But there's always so many. Blows my
Yeah.
mind. Well,
And the time, we don't have time, right?
right? 100%. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, RaeAnne. This was just an absolute pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you, Book Solid listeners, for being here. We will link up RaeAnne's social media and her website and her Amazon link for her beautiful book and all her books. Thanks for being here.
It was a delight. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you.
All right.